The dust hung thick in the air as Sarah Daniels clutched her worn leather Bible to her chest, her stomach growling so loudly she was certain the entire town of Promise Creek could hear it. 3 days without food had left her weak, desperate, and standing outside the only general store in this God-forsaken corner of Arizona territory with nothing to trade but the last connection to her departed mother. The year was 1875, and the West had proven far less golden than the pamphlets had promised. Sarah's journey from Boston had depleted what little savings she'd managed to scrape together after her parents' passing. The teaching position that had been guaranteed in the letters turned out to be nothing more than empty words on paper when she arrived in Promise Creek 2 weeks ago. Sarah straightened her threadbare dress, ran her fingers through her tangled auburn hair, and summoned what dignity she had left. Her slender frame had already grown more angular, her cheekbones more pronounced from hunger. At 22, she was alone in a land that seemed intent on breaking her spirit. The bell above the store's door jingled as she entered, and the smell of coffee and dried goods assaulted her senses, making her stomach clench painfully. Behind the counter stood a man with a stern face and calculating eyes. Mr. Hollister, the proprietor, regarded her with immediate suspicion. "I told you yesterday, Miss Daniels, no credit," he said flatly. Sarah swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for credit today, Mr. Hollister." Her fingers trembled as she placed the Bible on the counter. "This was my mother's. The binding is real leather, and there are family records dating back 3 generations inscribed inside. It must be worth something." Hollister barely glanced at the book. "What would I do with another Bible? Can't eat scripture, miss." "Please," Sarah whispered, "just enough flour and beans to last a few days, until I find work." The store fell silent. Sarah hadn't noticed the tall figure browsing the shelves in the corner, but she felt his presence now as he moved toward the counter. His spurs jingled with each deliberate step. "That's quite a thing to trade," the deep voice said from behind her. Sarah turned to face a man unlike any she'd encountered in Promise Creek. His eyes were the color of a summer sky, startling against his sun-darkened skin. A well-worn Stetson sat atop dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his duster. He wasn't young, perhaps 30, but his face carried the weathered experience of someone who'd lived many lifetimes under the relentless western sun. "A woman doesn't part with her Bible unless she's desperate," he continued, his gaze assessing her without judgment. Sarah lifted her chin. "I'm not looking for charity, sir." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Name's Keane Zimmerman, miss, and charity isn't what I'm offering." He reached past her and slid the Bible back across the counter toward her. "Keep it. You'll dine at my table tonight." Mr. Hollister's eyebrows shot up. "You sure about that, Zimmerman? This lady's new in town, don't know nothing about her." Keane Zimmerman's eyes never left Sarah's face. "I know enough. She's hungry and she's decent. Only a decent woman would try to trade something that clearly means a great deal to her instead of finding other means to survive." The implication of other means wasn't lost on Sarah, and her cheeks flushed with indignation and embarrassment. "Mr. Zimmerman, I appreciate your concern, but just Keane," he interrupted. "And I'm not concerned. I'm offering a fair trade, dinner for conversation. My ranch is 5 miles outside of town, and it gets mighty quiet out there." He turned to Hollister. "Put together a basket. Flour, beans, coffee, salt pork, and whatever fresh goods you've got hidden in the back. Add it to my account." Sarah clutched her Bible tighter. "I can't accept that." "You're not accepting anything yet," Keane said. "Just dinner. After that, we'll call it even." A person shouldn't have to choose between nourishment for the body and nourishment for the soul. He nodded toward the Bible. Something in his words struck her deeply. Sarah had prayed for guidance, for a sign that she hadn't made a terrible mistake in coming west. Was this an answer or merely another complication? "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked quietly. The question seemed to amuse him. "You don't. But ask anyone in Promise Creek about Keane Zimmerman, and they'll tell you I'm many things, but not the kind of man who takes advantage of a lady in distress." "It's true enough," Hollister grudgingly admitted. "Zimmerman's got a reputation as a hard man, but a fair one." Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. Her stomach made the decision for her with another painful growl. Very well, Mr. Keane, I accept your invitation to dinner. A smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines. I'll have my wagon out front in 10 minutes. That'll give Hollister time to gather your supplies. After Keane left, Hollister leaned across the counter. That's the first time I've seen Zimmerman show interest in anything besides cattle and horses since he came to these parts 5 years ago. Man keeps to himself, runs that ranch of his with just a handful of hands, built it from nothing after the war. The war? Sarah asked, curiosity piqued despite herself. Civil War, don't know which side he fought for and nobody's brave enough to ask, but whatever he saw, it left its mark. Sarah watched through the store window as Keane spoke with a young stable boy across the street. Even from a distance, she could see a natural authority in his bearing. He was a man accustomed to giving orders and having them followed. True to his word, 10 minutes later a wagon appeared outside the store. Keane stepped down and opened the door for her, offering his hand as she climbed up. His palm was calloused but warm against her gloved fingers. I've asked Hollister to deliver the supplies to your boarding house, he said as he settled beside her on the bench seat. Where are you staying? Mrs. Winslow's, on Cottonwood Street. He nodded and clicked his tongue, setting the horses in motion. Martha Winslow's a good woman. Tough but fair. She's been kind enough to extend my stay despite my financial difficulties. The wagon rumbled down Promise Creek's main street, drawing curious glances from townspeople. Sarah felt her cheeks warming again, acutely aware of how this must appear. People will talk, she murmured. Keane glanced sideways at her. People always do. It's what keeps them entertained between cattle drives and church socials. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up before them, a vast expanse of rugged beauty, unlike anything Sarah had seen in Massachusetts. The late afternoon sun bathed the distant mountains in golden light, and for the first time since arriving in Arizona territory, Sarah felt something other than despair. The sensation was so unexpected it took her a moment to recognize it as hope. How did you end up in Promise Creek? Keane asked, breaking the companionable silence. Sarah hesitated, then decided honesty was the only currency she had left. A teaching position that didn't exist by the time I arrived. The previous schoolmaster's daughter returned from back east and took the post. Eliza Thompson, Keane said with a nod. Town council would have had a hard time turning her down, what with her father being on the council himself. Yes, well, it left me without prospects. I'd spent nearly everything I had on the journey west, and no family to return to. He asked, his voice gentle. Sarah shook her head. My parents died last winter, influenza. I was working as a seamstress's assistant, but the pay was barely enough to keep a roof over my head when I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Arizona territory. It seemed like Providence. Providence has a peculiar sense of timing sometimes, Keane observed. But I find things usually work out the way they're meant to, even when it doesn't seem so at first. The wagon crested a small rise, and suddenly a sprawling ranch appeared in the valley below. A large main house constructed of sturdy logs and stone stood at the center, with several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn arranged around it. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and horses grazed in a fenced meadow nearby. Welcome to the Lazy Z, Keane said, a hint of pride in his voice. Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. This is not what I expected. What did you expect? Something smaller, I suppose. This is impressive. Keane's expression grew distant. Built it piece by piece. Every fence post, every corral, started with 20 acres and 10 head of cattle. Now it's 2,000 acres and nearly 500 head. As they approached the main house, a Mexican woman emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face lit up at the sight of the wagon, then registered surprise when she noticed Sarah. That's Alina, Keane explained. She and her husband, Miguel, have been with me since the beginning. They keep me fed and the house in order. Alina hurried down the steps as Keane helped Sarah from the wagon. Senor Keane, you bring a guest. Her warm brown eyes studied Sarah with undisguised curiosity. Alina, this is Miss Sarah Daniels. She'll be joining us for dinner. The look that passed between Keane and Alina contained volumes of unspoken communication. Bueno, bueno, Alina exclaimed, her face breaking into a wide smile. I make extra biscuits today. Like always I tell you, Senor Keane, the Lord provides when we need. Sarah followed them inside, momentarily overwhelmed by the transition from the bright outdoors to the dimmer interior. As her eyes adjusted, she was struck by the unexpected comfort of the home. She had imagined a bachelor's sparse quarters, but instead found a well-appointed living area with solid furniture, bookshelves lined with volumes, and even a piano in the corner. You play? Sarah asked, nodding toward the instrument. Not a note, Keane admitted. But I like the idea that someone might someday. He paused, then asked, do you? My mother taught me. It's been some time, though. Perhaps after dinner, he suggested, then gestured toward a hallway. There's a washroom down there if you'd like to freshen up. Dinner should be ready shortly. The cool water against her face was heavenly. Sarah took a moment to gather herself, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the washbasin. Who was this woman with the hollow cheeks and desperate eyes? She barely recognized herself. You'll get through this, she whispered to her reflection. You always do. When she returned to the main room, delicious aromas were wafting from the kitchen. Elena was setting the dining table with what appeared to be the good china and silverware, humming softly as she worked. Can I help? Sarah offered. Elena looked up, startled. No, señorita, you are guest. Please, I'd like to be useful. After a moment's hesitation, Elena handed her a stack of napkins. You fold these, maybe. Senor Keane, he never care about such things when it just him, but tonight is special. Why is tonight special? Sarah asked, carefully folding the first napkin. Elena glanced toward the back door where Keane had disappeared to wash up outside. Because you are here, señorita, first lady to sit at this table since the house was built. Sarah nearly dropped the napkin. Surely that can't be true. 5 years, Elena confirmed. No ladies for dinner, no parties, no sociables, just work, always work, until today. Her dark eyes twinkled. Something about you must be very special, no? Before Sarah could respond, the back door opened and Keane entered, his hair damp and his face freshly shaved. He'd changed into a clean shirt, and Sarah was struck again by how handsome he was when not obscured by trail dust. Something smells magnificent, Elena, he said, then noticed Sarah with the napkins. I see you've been put to work already. I offered, Sarah explained. It seemed the least I could do. Miguel appeared from the kitchen carrying a large platter of roasted beef, followed by Elena with dishes of vegetables and potatoes. The spread was more food than Sarah had seen in weeks, and her stomach contracted painfully at the sight and smell of it. When they were seated, Keane bowed his head. Miss Daniels, would you do us the honor? Surprised, Sarah bowed her head and offered a simple blessing for the meal and those who had prepared it. As she spoke the familiar words, she felt a peculiar sensation, as if something long off balance was finally finding its proper alignment. The meal was everything her hungry body craved. Sarah had to force herself to take small, measured bites when she wanted nothing more than to devour everything in sight. The conversation flowed more easily than she expected, with Keane asking thoughtful questions about her life in Boston and her journey west. He listened attentively to her answers, revealing a keen intelligence behind those piercing blue eyes. And what of you? Sarah asked eventually. How did a man from where exactly? Kentucky, he supplied. How did a man from Kentucky end up in Arizona territory? Something flickered across his face, a shadow of old pain quickly masked. After the war, there wasn't much left for me back home. Came west like many others, looking for something new. And did you find it? Keane's gaze held hers for a long moment. Parts of it. Still searching for the rest, I suppose. After dinner, despite her protests, Elena and Miguel insisted on clearing the table themselves. Keane led Sarah to the front porch where 2 rocking chairs faced the spectacular sunset, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and purple. It's beautiful, Sarah breathed. I've never seen colors like that. The West takes getting used to, Keane said, settling into one of the chairs. It's harsh and unforgiving, but there's a freedom here you won't find anywhere else. Freedom to starve, apparently, Sarah said with a wry smile. Keane chuckled. That too, but also freedom to become whoever you want to be. Out here, people don't much care where you came from or what your daddy did. They care about what you can do and whether your word is good. The light was fading, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Sarah felt more at peace than she had in months, her belly full and her mind temporarily free from worry. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for the meal, but for—" she struggled to find the right words, "for letting me keep my dignity today." Keane was silent for so long she thought perhaps he hadn't heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and contemplative. "I know something about losing everything, Miss Daniels. During the war, I watched men give up the last things they had: wedding rings, family watches, letters from home just to survive another day. I swore then that if I made it through, I'd never let anyone have to make that choice if I could help it." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep within Sarah. This man, this cowboy with the hard exterior, understood loss in a way few others could. "Your Bible," he continued, "it's more than just a book to you, I could see that. Some things are worth more than their weight in gold or flour. It was the last gift my mother gave me before she died," Sarah admitted. Her own mother had given it to her when she married. Inside, there are notes in the margins, 3 generations of women finding comfort in the same words. "Then I'm glad you still have it," Keane said simply. They sat in companionable silence as night fell completely, the only sounds the creaking of the rocking chairs and the distant lowing of cattle. "I should get you back to town," Keane said eventually, though he made no move to stand. "Yes," Sarah agreed, equally reluctant. When he finally rose and offered his hand to help her up, their fingers lingered together a moment longer than necessary. Sarah felt a small thrill run through her at the contact, then immediately chastised herself for the reaction. This man had shown her kindness, nothing more. The ride back to Promise Creek was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. When they reached Mrs. Winslow's boarding house, Keane helped her down from the wagon. "Thank you again for dinner," Sarah said, standing awkwardly on the bottom step. "My pleasure, Miss Daniels. Sarah, please. After breaking bread at your table, I think we can dispense with formalities." His smile was visible even in the dim light from the boarding house windows. "Sarah, then." He hesitated, then added, "I could use some help at the ranch. Alina's eyesight isn't what it used to be, and there's bookkeeping that's fallen behind. If you're interested in work, that is." Hope surged within her. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Zimmerman?" "Keane," he corrected. "And yes, I suppose I am. Nothing permanent, just until you find something more suitable to your education and talents." "I accept," Sarah said quickly before he could change his mind. "When would you like me to start? I'll come for you tomorrow morning if that's not too soon." "Tomorrow is perfect." He tipped his hat. "Until tomorrow, then. Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Keane." As she watched his wagon disappear down the darkened street, Sarah pressed her hand against the Bible in her pocket. For the first time since arriving in Promise Creek, her prayers had been answered, though in a most unexpected way. In her room, Sarah found the supplies Keane had purchased neatly arranged on her small table. The generosity of the gesture brought tears to her eyes. There was enough food to last her weeks, not days. She ran her fingers over the packages of flour, sugar, coffee, and salt pork, marveling at how quickly her fortune had changed. Sleep came easily that night, her body satisfied with nourishment, and her mind filled with thoughts of blue eyes and a gentle smile. The following morning, Sarah woke before dawn, nervous energy propelling her from bed. She dressed with care in her second-best dress, a simple blue cotton that had faded with washing but still maintained its shape. Her hair, usually pulled back severely to keep it out of her way, she arranged in a softer style, with a few tendrils framing her face. Mrs. Winslow raised an eyebrow when Sarah appeared for breakfast. "My, don't you look nice this morning." "I've found employment," Sarah announced, trying to keep her tone casual. "At the Lazy Z Ranch, bookkeeping and assistance with household matters. Keane Zimmerman's place." Mrs. Winslow's expression was unreadable. "That's an interesting development. He was kind enough to offer when he learned of my situation. Hum. The older woman buttered her biscuit thoughtfully. "Zimmerman's not known for his charity, so he must see something valuable in you. He's a good man, though, keeps to himself mostly, but always pays his debts and treats his workers fair." Before Sarah could respond, a knock came at the door. Mrs. Winslow went to answer it, returning a moment later with Keane following behind her. He looked different in the morning light, more imposing somehow, dressed in a clean work shirt and denim trousers, his gun belt settled low on his hips. "Good morning, Miss Daniels," he said formally, aware of Mrs. Winslow's presence. "Ready to start work?" "Yes, of course," Sarah replied, gathering her shawl. Mrs. Winslow folded her arms across her ample bosom. "You'll have her back at a decent hour, Mr. Zimmerman. You have my word, Mrs. Winslow. Miss Daniels will be returned safely before supper." The ride to the ranch was filled with Keane explaining what her duties would entail, organizing the ranch ledgers, helping Alina with household accounts, and possibly assisting with correspondence to cattle buyers in the East. "I've let things slide more than I should," he admitted. "Running cattle is what I know. Paperwork, not so much. I'm happy to help however I can," Sarah assured him. "I kept the books for my father's clockmaking business before he died." When they arrived at the ranch, Alina greeted Sarah like a long-lost relative, enveloping her in a warm embrace that smelled of cinnamon and coffee. "Gracias a Dios. Now maybe Senor Keane will have proper books so the tax man stop making the angry faces," Sarah laughed. "I'll do my best." Keane showed her to a small study off the main living area. A desk piled high with ledgers, invoices, and correspondence dominated the space. "I apologize for the mess," he said, looking genuinely chagrined. "I've meant to sort through it all, but you have a ranch to run," Sarah finished for him. "Don't worry, I'll have this organized in no time." Keane lingered in the doorway, watching as she removed her shawl and rolled up her sleeves. "If you need anything, Alina is in the kitchen. I'll be checking the north pasture fence line today, but I should be back by midday." After he left, Sarah surveyed the chaos before her and took a deep breath. This was what she was good at: creating order from disorder, finding patterns in numbers, bringing clarity to confusion. She set to work with methodical precision, sorting papers by date and type, creating neat stacks that would eventually form a coherent record of the ranch's business. The morning passed quickly, and before she knew it, Alina was calling her for lunch. Sarah was surprised to find Keane already at the table, his shirt damp with sweat from the morning's work. "Making progress?" he asked as she sat down. "Yes, though I've uncovered some concerning discrepancies in your cattle sales from last fall. It appears Mr. Hargrove in Tucson may have shorted you on payment for 30 head. Keane's eyebrows shot up. "You determined that in just a few hours," Sarah shrugged. "Numbers tell stories if you know how to read them. And this particular story suggests Mr. Hargrove owes you approximately $240. A slow smile spread across Keane's face. "I knew something felt off about that transaction. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I've drafted a letter requesting the balance due. You'll want to review it, of course. I have a feeling your version will be more diplomatic than mine would have been." After lunch, Sarah returned to her work with renewed energy. As she delved deeper into the ranch's finances, she developed a growing respect for what Keane had built. Despite the disorganized bookkeeping, the Lazy Z was clearly prosperous, with careful investments and strategic planning evident in the decisions he'd made. The afternoon sun was slanting through the study windows when Keane appeared in the doorway again. Time to head back to town. Sarah looked up, startled. "Already? But I've just started to make real progress. There will be more work tomorrow," he assured her, "and the day after that." As they rode back to Promise Creek, Sarah found herself talking animatedly about her findings and suggestions for improving the ranch's financial management. Keane listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that revealed his quick mind. "You know, most men would bristle at a woman telling them how to run their business affairs," Sarah observed. Keane's mouth quirked up at one corner. "I'm not most men, and I've never been foolish enough to reject good advice based on who's giving it." The days fell into a comfortable pattern. Each morning, Keane would arrive at the boarding house to collect Sarah, and each evening he would return her safely before supper. During the day, she worked diligently in the study, occasionally venturing out to watch Keane and his men work with the cattle or break new horses. On her 5th day at the ranch, a spring thunderstorm blew in unexpectedly. Sarah watched from the study window as the sky darkened and lightning split the horizon. Keane and his men rushed to secure the animals and equipment before the deluge hit. When Keane finally came inside, he was soaked to the skin, his dark hair plastered to his forehead and water dripping from his clothes onto Alina's clean floor. "Senor Keane," Alina scolded, hurrying toward him with towels. "You catch death standing there, go change rapido." He grimaced apologetically at Sarah. "I don't think we'll make it back to town tonight. That creek crossing will be flooded within the hour. I'll send one of the boys to let Mrs. Winslow know you're safe here." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness at the impropriety of staying overnight, but the rain hammering against the roof made it clear there was no alternative. "I understand," she said. "Mrs. Winslow will too, under the circumstances." Alina immediately began fussing about preparing a room for Sarah. "The blue room, I think, is closest to my room, so everything proper, yes." After Keane had changed into dry clothes, he joined Sarah in the kitchen where Alina was preparing dinner. The storm had created a cozy intimacy inside the house, with lamps lit against the early darkness and the comforting smell of stew bubbling on the stove. "I apologize for the inconvenience," Keane said, accepting a cup of coffee from Alina. "It's hardly your fault," Sarah replied. "You can't control the weather. Still, I know appearances matter, especially for a young woman on her own." Sarah appreciated his concern. "Mrs. Winslow knows I'm of good character, and from what I've gathered, your reputation in Promise Creek is beyond reproach." "That may be stretching it," he said with a chuckle, "but I do try to conduct myself honorably." After dinner, with the storm still raging outside, they gathered in the living room. The piano stood in the corner, its polished surface gleaming in the lamplight. "Would you play something?" Keane asked. "If you wouldn't mind." Sarah hesitated only briefly before taking a seat at the instrument. Her fingers found the keys tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as muscle memory took over. She played a simple melody her mother had taught her, the sweet notes filling the room and somehow making it feel even more like home. When she finished, she turned to find Keane watching her with an expression that made her heart quicken. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "It's been a long time," she admitted. "I'm out of practice. Didn't sound that way to me." Alina had discreetly disappeared, leaving them alone. The realization made Sarah suddenly self-conscious. "Perhaps I should retire," she suggested, rising from the piano bench. "It's been a long day." "Of course," Keane stood as well. "Alina will have prepared everything you need. If you require anything else, her room is just down the hall." "Thank you for everything." Sarah hesitated, then added, "I'm not sure what I would have done if we hadn't met that day in the store." "You would have found your way," Keane said with certainty. "You're not a woman who gives up easily." His faith in her strength was oddly moving. "Good night, Keane." "Good night, Sarah. Sleep well." The blue room was small but comfortable, with a quilted bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the rain-drenched ranch. Alina had left a nightgown laid out on the bed, probably her own, given its ample proportions, and a pitcher of fresh water on the washstand. Sarah changed quickly and slipped between the cool sheets, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. She thought of Keane downstairs, perhaps sitting by the fire with a book or going over the work she'd completed today. The image brought an unexpected warmth to her chest. She was falling for him, she realized with a start. This quiet, complex man with his ranch and his books and his haunted eyes, he had worked his way into her heart without her noticing. The revelation was both thrilling and terrifying. Morning brought clear skies and puddles reflecting the sun. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, and the sound of men's voices outside as the ranch resumed its normal activities. Alina had thoughtfully laid out a fresh apron for Sarah to wear over yesterday's dress. When she emerged from her room, she found Keane already at the breakfast table, studying a map spread out before him. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile that made her pulse quicken. "Sleep well. Very thank you. The storm passed, moved east overnight. The creek still running high, but the crossing should be passable by midday. I've sent word to Mrs. Winslow that you're fine." After breakfast, Sarah returned to the study while Keane went to assess any damage the storm might have caused. She tried to focus on the ledgers, but her mind kept wandering to her revelation from the night before. How unprofessional to develop feelings for her employer after less than a week. Just before noon, Keane appeared in the doorway, ready to head back to town. Something in his tone made Sarah look up sharply. "Is everything all right?" he hesitated. "I've just had word that a cattle buyer from Kansas City is arriving in Promise Creek tomorrow. I'll need to meet with him, show him the herd. I may not be able to bring you out to the ranch for a few days." "Oh," Sarah tried to hide her disappointment. "Of course, your business must come first." "I was thinking," Keane said slowly, "that it might be more efficient if you stayed here at the ranch while I'm conducting business. That way you could continue with the books without interruption." Sarah's heart leapt, then caution reasserted itself. "I'm not sure that would be proper, Keane. Elena and Miguel would be here the entire time," he added quickly. "And I'd make arrangements with Mrs. Winslow. Perhaps she could send over some of your things." The practical part of Sarah's mind noted that it did make sense from a business perspective. The emotional part, the part that wanted to spend more time in this house with this man, was dangerously eager to agree. "If Mrs. Winslow approves, then yes, that would be a sensible arrangement," she said carefully. The relief on Keane's face was evident. "Good. That's good." The ride to town was filled with discussion of the work still to be done on the ranch accounts. Sarah found herself growing excited about the projects she could complete with uninterrupted time at the Lazy Z. Mrs. Winslow, to Sarah's surprise, approved of the arrangement with minimal fuss. "Elena Mendoza is worth 10 chaperones," the boarding house keeper declared. "And it makes practical sense. Just be mindful of your reputation, my dear. People in small towns have little to do but talk." "I'll be the soul of propriety," Sarah promised as she packed a small valise with clothes and necessities. When they returned to the ranch that afternoon, Elena was clearly delighted by the news that Sarah would be staying. "I fix up the blue room permanent," she announced. "Make it nice and pretty for you." "That's very kind, Elena, but it's only temporary," Sarah reminded her. "Just until the ranch books are in order." Elena and Keane exchanged a glance that Sarah couldn't quite interpret. "Of course, señorita," Elena said with a knowing smile. "Temporary." The next morning, Keane departed early to meet the cattle buyer, leaving Sarah with a list of accounts to review and letters to draft. The day passed quickly, the quiet of the house broken only by Elena's humming as she went about her chores. By evening, Sarah had accomplished more than she'd expected. She wandered out to the front porch, watching the sunset paint the landscape in familiar golds and purples. Elena joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Beautiful, no," the older woman said, handing Sarah one of the cups. "It is." "I never tire of it." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Elena spoke again. "Senor Keane, he different since you come, more, how you say, alive." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just organizing his accounts, Elena. Pa is more than books." Elena tapped her chest over her heart. "He smile now. Before he work, build ranch bigger, never stop to enjoy. Now he come home for lunch. Before he eat jerky and saddle." "He's a good man," Sarah said carefully. "The best," Elena agreed, "but lonely. War takes something from him. Make him afraid to want happiness." She patted Sarah's hand. "Until you." Sarah didn't know how to respond to that, so she sipped her coffee and watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Keane returned late the following day, looking tired but satisfied. He found Sarah in the study, surrounded by neatly organized stacks of papers. "Successful trip?" she asked, looking up from her work. "Very, sold 60 head at a good price. The buyer was impressed with the quality of our stock." He sank into the chair opposite her desk. "How are things here?" "Progressing well. I've reconciled all the accounts from the past year and drafted replies to the most pressing correspondence." She hesitated, then added, "I also took the liberty of creating a filing system for future transactions." Instead of being offended by her initiative, Keane looked delighted. "You're a marvel, Sarah Daniels." The simple praise warmed her more than it should have. "Just doing what you hired me for." "No," he said seriously, "you're doing far more. This ranch hasn't run this smoothly since, well, ever." Their eyes met across the desk and something electric passed between them. Sarah was the first to look away, her heart pounding. "Will you join me for dinner?" Keane asked. Elena's been cooking all afternoon. I'd be delighted. Dinner was a cheerful affair, with Keane sharing amusing stories about the cattle buyers' city ways and Elena contributing tales of the local gossip she'd gathered while shopping in town. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in months, perhaps years. After the meal, they moved to the living room where Keane stoked the fire against the evening chill. Sarah took her now customary seat at the piano, playing softly while Keane relaxed in his chair, eyes closed. Listening, when she finished, he opened his eyes and regarded her thoughtfully. "You know, there's a spring dance in Promise Creek next Saturday. The whole town turns out for it." Sarah's fingers stilled on the keys. "Oh, I was wondering if you might consider attending, with me." He added the last two words carefully, as if testing how they sounded. Sarah's pulse quickened. This wasn't a business arrangement or a practical suggestion. This was something else entirely. "Are you asking me to the dance, Keane Zimmerman?" she asked, unable to keep a small smile from her lips. "I believe I am." He looked equal parts determined and nervous. "It's been a long time since I attended a social function, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather accompany me." "Then yes," Sarah said, her smile widening. "I'd be honored to attend the dance with you." The relief and pleasure on his face was worth any town gossip that might result from their outing. The days leading up to the dance passed in a pleasant blur of work and increasingly comfortable companionship. Sarah continued to make progress with the ranch accounts, while Keane went about his daily tasks with a new energy that even his ranch hands commented on. 2 days before the dance, Elena approached Sarah with a mysterious smile. "Come, señorita, I have something to show you." Sarah followed her to the blue room, which had indeed been transformed into a more permanent-looking space during her stay. Elena opened the wardrobe and pulled out a dress Sarah had never seen before, a beautiful creation of deep blue silk with delicate lace trim. "Elena, what is this?" "For the dance," Elena said proudly. "Señor Keane, he ride all the way to Tucson to buy it, say it must match your eyes." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "He bought this for me, see, he say your work dress not right for dancing." Elena held the gown up against Sarah. "It needs small adjustments." "I can fix." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. No one had given her something so beautiful since her parents died. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. "When did he do this?" "Last trip to town." "Ask Senora at dress shop what would fit lady your size." Elena's eyes twinkled. "He very determined to get right one." That evening, when Keane returned from checking fence lines, Sarah was waiting on the porch. He stopped at the foot of the steps, his expression turning concerned when he saw her face. "Is something wrong?" "Elena showed me the dress," Sarah said quietly. Keane ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "I was going to surprise you tomorrow. I should have asked first if it would be welcome." "It was presumptuous. It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," Sarah interrupted, descending the steps until she stood before him. "Thank you, Keane." Relief washed over his features. "You like it then? I love it, but you shouldn't have spent so much." "I wanted to," he said simply. "You deserve beautiful things, Sarah." They stood close now, closer than propriety strictly allowed. Sarah could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that always surrounded him. "Keane," whatever she might have said was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. They stepped apart as a rider came into view, one of Keane's ranch hands returning from town with supplies. The moment broken, they returned to the house for dinner, both acutely aware of the unspoken words hanging between them. The night of the dance arrived clear and mild, with a full moon rising over the eastern mountains. Sarah stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. The blue silk dress fit perfectly after Elena's adjustments, emphasizing her slender waist and complementing her auburn hair, which Elena had arranged in an elegant style with soft curls framing her face. A knock at the door announced Elena. "Señor Keane, wait downstairs," she said, then gasped when she saw Sarah. "Ay, que linda, so beautiful." Sarah smoothed the silk nervously. "Do I look all right?" "More than all right," Elena assured her, pressing something into Sarah's hand. "Here, final touch." It was a small bottle of rose-scented perfume. Sarah dabbed a tiny amount behind her ears and at her wrists, the delicate fragrance adding a final touch of femininity. When she descended the stairs, Keane was waiting in the entryway, dressed in a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and the expression that crossed his face, wonder, admiration, desire, made Sarah's breath catch. "You are." He began, then seemed to run out of words. "Thank you for the dress," Sarah said, feeling suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "It's perfect." "No," Keane said, finding his voice. "You're what's perfect. The dress is just lucky to be along for the ride." The compliment, delivered with such sincerity, warmed Sarah to her core. Keane offered his arm, and she placed her hand upon it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric of his suit. The ride to Promise Creek was magical, with the moonlight silvering the landscape and a pleasant anticipation building between them. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so alive, so aware of every sensation: the cool night air, the rhythm of the horses, the occasional brush of Keane's arm against hers. The town hall was transformed for the occasion, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and wildflowers arranged in mason jars on every available surface. A small band was setting up on a platform at one end of the room, and already couples and families were gathering, greeting each other with the easy familiarity of a close-knit community. Their entrance caused a momentary lull in conversation. Sarah felt the weight of curious stares and whispered comments. Keane, seeming oblivious to the attention, guided her confidently through the crowd, stopping to introduce her to various townspeople. "Miss Daniels has been organizing my ranch accounts," he explained to an elderly couple. "The Lazy Z has never run more efficiently. About time you got some proper help out there," the old man said with a wink, "though I suspect it ain't just her bookkeeping skills keeping her around." "Ezra," his wife scolded, though her eyes twinkled with the same speculation. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself enjoying the company of Promise Creek's residents. They were straightforward people with a frontier directness that reminded her of her father's relatives in rural Massachusetts. When the band began to play, Keane turned to her with a formal bow. "May I have this dance, Miss Daniels?" "You may, Mr. Zimmerman," she replied with equal formality, though her smile betrayed her delight. His hand at her waist was warm and sure as he led her in a simple waltz. They moved together with surprising harmony, as if they'd been dancing partners for years rather than first-time companions. "You dance well for a rancher," Sarah observed. "My mother insisted all her sons learn, said no child of hers would embarrass her at social functions." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his family, and Sarah wondered again about the life he'd left behind in Kentucky. "And did you embarrass her, I mean?" The question brought him back to the present, his expression softening. "Not at dancing, at least, in other ways." "Well, that's a story for another time." They danced 3 more dances before taking a break for refreshments. As Keane went to fetch them punch, Mrs. Winslow appeared at Sarah's side. "You look radiant, my dear," the older woman said warmly. "That color suits you." "Thank you, Mrs. Winslow." It was a gift from Keane. Mrs. Winslow's eyebrows rose, but her smile remained kind. "I see, things are progressing then." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "We're friends and I work for him. MMM. The boarding house keeper's knowing look made it clear she wasn't fooled. "Well, for what it's worth, I approve. Keane Zimmerman is a good man who's been alone too long, and you deserve happiness after all you've been through." Before Sarah could respond, Keane returned with 2 cups of punch. He nodded respectfully to Mrs. Winslow. "Evening, madam." "Enjoying the festivities, indeed, Mr. Zimmerman. Your young lady was just telling me how well she's settling in at the Lazy Z." If Keane noticed the "your young lady" remark, he didn't correct it. "Sarah's been a godsend. I don't know how I managed before she came along." "Yes, well, sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways." Mrs. Winslow patted Sarah's arm, like bringing 2 people together over a Bible and an empty stomach. After she moved away, Keane gave Sarah a quizzical look. "What was that about?" "Mrs. Winslow has an active imagination," Sarah replied, taking a sip of punch to hide her smile. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of dancing, conversation, and laughter. Sarah found herself at ease among the townspeople in a way she hadn't been since arriving in Promise Creek. With Keane at her side, she was no longer the desperate outsider but a respected member of the community. As the dance wound down, Keane leaned close to her ear. Ready to head back, the warmth of his breath against her skin sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. Yes, I think so. They said their goodbyes and stepped out into the cool night air. The streets of Promise Creek were quiet now, most residents either still at the dance or already home in bed. Keane helped Sarah into the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The ride back to the ranch was filled with comfortable silence and occasional comments about the evening. Sarah felt a strange mix of contentment and anticipation, as if something important was about to happen, but she wasn't quite sure what. When they arrived at the Lazy Z, the house was dark except for a single lamp left burning in the window. Keane helped Sarah down from the wagon, then surprised her by not immediately heading for the house. "Would you walk with me a moment?" he asked. "It's a beautiful night." Sarah nodded, and he offered his arm again. They strolled toward a small rise near the house where a lone oak tree stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky. "I come here sometimes to think," Keane said as they reached the tree. "You can see the whole ranch from here." In the moonlight, the Lazy Z spread out before them the main house with its welcoming lamp, the barn and corrals, the pastures stretching away toward distant mountains. It was a kingdom of sorts, built by one man's determination and hard work. "It's beautiful," Sarah said softly. "It is now," Keane agreed. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the silvery light. "Sarah, there's something I need to say." Her heart began to race. "Yes. When you came to work for me, it was supposed to be temporary, just until you found something more suitable." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "But these past weeks, having you at the ranch, seeing you every day, it's made me realize something." "What's that?" Sarah barely trusted herself to speak. "I don't want it to be temporary anymore." Keane took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "I want you to stay, not just as my bookkeeper, as more." The world seemed to still around them, the only sound the distant howl of a coyote and the thundering of Sarah's heart in her ears. "Keane, are you saying—" "I'm saying I've fallen in love with you, Sarah Daniels." The words came out in a rush as if he'd been holding them back for too long. "I know it's sudden, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to tell you before." "Before what?" He looked away briefly. "Before you decide to move on, find that teaching position or go back east. I couldn't bear to lose you without at least letting you know how I feel." Sarah reached up to touch his face, turning it back toward her. "I'm not going anywhere, Keane." Hope flickered in his eyes. "No, no." Sarah smiled, feeling a weight lift from her heart. "Because I've fallen in love with you too." For a moment, Keane seemed stunned, as if he hadn't dared believe his feelings might be returned. Then, slowly, reverently, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Sarah responded, sliding her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more profound, a promise, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, Keane rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he murmured. "When you walked into that store with your Bible, looking like a strong wind might blow you away, I just wanted to help. I never imagined you'd become so essential to me." "God works in mysterious ways," Sarah said, echoing Mrs. Winslow's earlier words. "I was praying for a way to survive." "He sent me you." Keane smiled, the moonlight catching the tears that had gathered in his eyes. "And here I thought he'd sent you to save me." They stood together under the oak tree for a long time, talking softly about the future, their future that suddenly stretched before them, bright with possibility. As spring turned to summer, the Lazy Z flourished under their joint care. Sarah's efficient management of the ranch's business affairs allowed Keane to focus on expanding their operations, while her presence in the house transformed it from a mere dwelling to a true home. On a warm evening in July, exactly 3 months after their first meeting in Hollister's store, Keane led Sarah once again to the oak tree on the rise. This time, beneath its spreading branches, he dropped to one knee. "Sarah Daniels," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "You walked into my life with nothing but courage and a Bible, and you've given me more happiness than I ever thought I'd find in this world." Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Sarah's answer was immediate and joyful. "Yes, Keane, yes, with all my heart." He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, not ornate, but solid and true, like the man who offered it. As he rose to kiss her, Sarah thought of the desperate woman who had tried to trade her mother's Bible for food just 3 months ago. How impossible it would have seemed then to imagine this moment, this happiness. "What are you thinking?" Keane asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Sarah smiled, her hand resting over the pocket where she still carried her mother's Bible. "I'm thinking that sometimes when you're at your lowest point, that's when miracles happen. Like finding love over a Bible and a bowl of stew," Keane suggested, his arms tightening around her. "Exactly like that," Sarah agreed, reaching up to kiss him again as the setting sun painted the lazy Z in shades of gold, promising many more beautiful tomorrows to come. They were married in the Promise Creek Church that autumn, with Alina weeping joyfully in the front pew, and the entire town turning out to witness the union of the once solitary rancher and the Eastern schoolteacher who had found each other against all odds. Sarah wore a gown of ivory silk, with her mother's Bible carried as her something old. As she walked down the aisle toward Keane, who stood tall and proud in his best suit, she felt her parents' presence, their blessing on this unexpected path her life had taken. The minister, speaking of God's providence and the mysterious ways love finds us when we least expect it, seemed to be telling their story directly. When it came time for their vows, Keane's strong voice carried through the church, steady and sure as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Sarah for all the days of his life. When Sarah spoke her own vows, she added words that brought tears to Keane's eyes. "I promise to always remember that true wealth isn't measured in gold or goods, but in love freely given and gratefully received." Their life together at the Lazy Z blossomed like the desert after rain. Sarah's efficient management helped the ranch prosper beyond Keane's expectations, while his steady strength gave her the security she'd lacked since losing her parents. A year after their wedding, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Alina, after both their mothers. Keane, the battle-hardened cowboy who had once seemed so formidable to everyone in Promise Creek, was transformed by fatherhood into a man who could be found rocking a fussy infant in the middle of the night, singing old Kentucky lullabies in a surprisingly gentle baritone. As their family grew a son, James Michael, joining them 2 years later, so did the Lazy Z. With careful planning and Sarah's shrewd business sense complementing Keane's practical ranching knowledge, they expanded their holdings and became one of the most respected cattle operations in the territory. Yet for all their success, it was the simple moments that brought them the most joy, reading together by the fire in the evenings, Sarah playing the piano while their children danced around the living room, Sunday dinners with Alina and Miguel, who became like grandparents to the children. And always, on the anniversary of the day they met, Keane would prepare a special dinner and say with a smile, "Your place is set at my table tonight, and every night for the rest of our lives." Sarah would touch the leather-bound Bible that still held a place of honor in their home and reply, "Some treasures can't be measured in flour and beans." Then they would share a kiss that held all the wonder of that first embrace under the oak tree, grateful for the hunger and desperation that had led her to offer her most precious possession in exchange for food, and for the kindness of a lonely cowboy who had seen her worth and invited her not just to his table, but into his heart.